later. So objectives for tonight are understand principles of academic writing as they apply to us as PhD students, tips, tools, and conventions, to explore techniques to remove wordiness, because for most of us, our writing is just way too many words that we didn't actually need in the first place. And our job is to communicate a story across as effectively as we can. And although we're told with a PhD dissertation, try to do 100,000 words, it's surprisingly easy, for example, to write 120,000 words. We may not think we have it in us, and we may think, oh, that's a lot. But the truth is, as we write, it's easier for us to put more words in there than we really do need. So I want to focus on removing that. And I want to focus on developing simple skills to help us refine our own writing. So this is about, as I write, how do I make it better? So let me just come back to that one slide here. Tonight is not a grammar lesson. Please do not ask me questions about grammar. As a native speaker, I understand what is good grammar and what is bad grammar. Can I tell you the reason why? No. And I think for many of us, when we are working in our first language, our native language, we have that sort of understanding. Yeah, that's right. That's not right. But we can't tell you why. So don't get too hung up on that. And I wanted to come back to this slide really because it introduces this one. And this is a starting reminder. Don't worry about making sure everything you write is perfect. This is actually something I picked up off a university website, by the way. Okay, so although we only accept applications written in English, we understand that our global community represents different proficiencies. So grammar, punctuation, capitalization, including a Z when us more British-oriented people would have used an S. Anything an English teacher would have told you to pay special attention to is really not part of our criterion. Sometimes in a dissertation, it's going to slip through, and that's okay. What many supervisors and many examining committees are looking for is the ability to get the message across in a way that is clear enough. It doesn't have to be perfect. So from our perspective here in this Zoom room tonight, the focus is on let's tell the story properly, not let's worry about the little nitty-gritty pieces of grammar and stuff like that. So as we proceed, I'm going to focus on things that we can do regardless of our level or skill in English so that we can make our writing better. And to be fair, Farrell will tell you, well, I am terrible at spelling. I am terrible at grammar. I do not know when to use an apostrophe. I still message him when I'm writing something, say, does the apostrophe go here, or do I not need it at all? So little things like that, sometimes we don't have to worry about. We have to worry about the overall structure, the clarity of the idea, and most importantly, look, you're trying to explain to another person to understand what your research and in particular your findings and your conclusions are. You've got to just make sure that another person who may also be somebody who maybe has English as an additional language is understanding that as well. So it comes down to things like the choice of words. It comes down to having shorter sentences. It comes down to just looking at whether a word adds value to a sentence that you write. So let's start off with this. These are my thoughts on what is good writing. And I want to say good academic writing, okay? But really it comes down to this. It should be clear. Don't use words that are difficult for any reader to be able to embrace. Your sentence structure should be simple enough that each sentence contains a point. We don't want to have a sentence that's half a page long that by the time you've finished reading, you forgot what it actually was in the first place. Many years ago, a friend of mine wrote a manuscript about world religion. And I sort of said, I'd like to read this. I'm interested because I'm interested in understanding, different worldviews and so forth. And he gave me this manuscript. He had nicely printed it out for me. And it was only about maybe 50 or 60 pages at the time. But it was the worst thing I've ever read, not because of the content, but because of the style. He had a paragraph that lasted 1.5 pages, single spaced, size 12 font. And within that paragraph that was 1.5 pages long, there were like 2 sentences. It was just so hard to read. When a sentence gets longer, you forget the point and you get lost in I guess, the sort of the wormholes that the sentence takes you down. We need to use short, clear sentences so that everything leads to one point. I'm talking about this, full stop. I'm moving on. I'm talking about something else. So for me, my guideline, if you have written a sentence or you are writing a sentence that is longer than 30, longer than 30 words, it's time to break that sentence into 2 points. You can't clearly show something in more words than that because the person reading it is going to get lost. They're going to forget what was at the start. Now, in a way, it kind of feels bad because when we go to primary school, when we first learn how to write in any language, we write really short sentences and they're not very exciting. And as we get older, we learn to develop those. We learn to make them longer sentences. But then we start getting to sentences that are about this and about that. In our academic writing, we want to focus on this first, full stop, that second, full stop. We want to make it clear. When I talk about clean, the second one in terms of what I think good writing is about, clean is about using good words. It is about, I can read a paragraph and I can understand it without having questions in my mind. That's actually clear communication. Now, that's got nothing to do with grammar, and honestly, not so much to do with word choice. It's simply about, look, have I written something that somebody else gets, somebody else can understand? And that's kind of segues into the third one. It's easy to understand that a person who is not familiar with your research can look at it and say, oh, I understand what that person, that candidate is writing about. It should be uncomplicated. Don't take us on a journey of circles to get to a point. Don't use, and the next part, don't use complicated words to try and express something, because that doesn't make the reading easier. That actually makes the reader think more. If I'm reading a doctoral dissertation, I would prefer simple, effective vocabulary, short, simple sentence structures, because I want you to tell me your research. I don't want to sit there with a dictionary and have to open up every so often and check what the meaning of a word is. Now, honestly speaking, that's happened. I've been given a dissertation. I've been reading through it, and I see a word or a short phrase, and I've had to go on to Google, or I've had to get the dictionary from my shelf, and I've had to check out, actually, what does this mean? Now, the moment I, as your reader, and worse, I, as your examiner, have to take my eye off what you've given me, go to another reference point, and find out what that word or that phrase means, you have failed. You have failed in your task of communicating with me, because I've had to go elsewhere. It's your job to make sure that I stick to what you're writing and I don't look elsewhere. Now, that's hard to do, but we should be looking at it and say, you know what? Is my choice of words, as I go through the different pages, the different sections, etc., is my choice of words fair, or should I be reconsidering? Now, there's sort of a joke, I guess. I always say, does it pass the parent test? And this may not apply to all of us, but you know what? The principle, parent or friend or brother or kid or whatever, you give it to someone in your family who is competent enough at reading. Doesn't matter about your subject, okay? But competent enough at reading, as they go through, do they say, oi, what does this mean? What's this word? I've never heard this before. And if they start doing that, you know you've got to sharpen up or clean up what you're doing. Ultimately, your job in the dissertation is to communicate an idea without confusion. And that's a hard thing to do, because we know our research so well. We look at it and we think, yeah, I know that word. And we don't think about the fact that actually somebody else may not. We understand the complexity of what we're saying because in our minds it makes sense. So here's where what becomes important is getting an outside party, somebody who isn't directly related to your research. So your supervisor, no way. You don't want to ask your supervisor this, because they're going to sort of try to support you. You want to find somebody, like I said, the parent test. So parents, brothers, sisters, friends. Do not do a friend from university, okay? Because they're going to sort of try to support you. But get someone else, or like a proofreading service. People like myself who will go through, get someone else to just look through it and say, okay, where do I need to tidy up? Are there areas where my writing is too complicated, or my writing doesn't convey a good message. So it's really important to factor that into your approach. So for tonight, what I'm going to do is move on to two things. One, I'm going to look at some common questions that people have about the dissertation writing and what we can do to make it clean, clear, easy to understand, uncomplicated, with simple and effective vocabulary. And then we're going to do a bit of editing on practice editing on some documents that I've put up for us as well. Let's move forward. So common candidate questions that we have, and I've linked these according to a few themes because it's really important, to think through some of these issues. Now, each of these issues, whether it be rewriting and revising, the next slide, which is style, the slide after that, which is editing and finishing, each of these helps us to make my dissertation fit these particular criteria. So let's have a look at rewriting and revising, because this is what we do all the time. And for many of us, we're going to be lost in the sense that, look, I start writing from day one. As I go through, I've collected my data, I've done an initial, an initial write-up and an initial analysis. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to reflect on it and I'm going to make some changes, which is normal. But it's a constant process. And in that constant process, if we change something in one section, sometimes we forget that we wrote about that somewhere else and that we have to change that too. So there might be a mismatch between, say, sections in chapter 1 and chapter 2 and sections in chapter 4 and chapter 5. That's normal. You can't quite try and remember every single time, but you have to catch that before you submit it. For us, when we're finished putting together, imagine putting together 400-page document. We think our research is strong. We think we've covered everything in the checklists. I have a number of checklists on what we should put in each chapter, for example, what are the minimum. So we've gone through and we've checked all of that. We've also got to make sure that chapter 2 and chapter 5 are saying the same thing, or chapter 1 and chapter 3 is talking about the same thing. And as we might have changed some of our approaches through our journey, the content of some of the chapters has to be updated as well, and we may not have already done that. So keep that in mind. Let's go through a few questions. What's the difference between proofreading and editing? I put this in here because most of us will probably go to a service for either proofreading or editing. So, for example, the third degree offers both proofreading and editing for our clients. The difference between the two is massive. If you ask me to proofread your document, I will check it for grammar, spelling, and general flow. That's it. I'm going to make sure that the sentences are clear. I'm going to make sure you've got no spelling mistakes. That will come across. Editing is massively different. Editing is taking beginning to end structure. Not only do I look at spelling, grammar, flow between paragraphs, but editing is I'm looking at the whole structure to say, have you put things the right way? Have you made a strong argument? So when you go to a service, or when you ask a friend, or even when you ask a supervisor, if you've got a good relationship with them, hey, can you proofread my document? Actually, you're not getting much. It's like the difference between going to McDonald's and a Michelin star restaurant. McDonald's will feed you. Michelin star restaurant will excite you with the food, or hopefully excite you with the food. So do understand that for most of us, even native speakers, so even when we're working in our native language, most of us need editing help, somebody else to look at the whole structure and come back and give suggestions how we can change that. At the early stages of what we're doing, at PhD level, I don't expect a candidate to have strong editing skills at that level, okay? But what I do expect a candidate to do is have made an effort to try and do the whole structure of the dissertation in a strong way. Not perfect, just strong. And that includes proofreading. So how important is rewriting and revising? Many of us write a proposal that becomes the basis of our first 3 chapters. But as we progress through the PhD journey, through the experience, we make a lot of changes. We think, our minds change, our ideas grow. So we have to go back and rewrite sections. We have to go back and revise sections because this is part of our growth. If at the time you are submitting your dissertation, your chapters 1, 2, and 3 still have big chunks of your research proposal not unchanged in it, you haven't done a good job. We expect that to evolve. 1 is a before, so we can frame our mind. The dissertation is how have we grown from that and how has it evolved? So as your supervisor, I should be able to look at your proposal and I should look at your dissertation. I should say, I see how it's changed. And that's through rewriting. That's through revising. It's from adding the different experiences we have, adding the different citations from the latest literature that we've read, and so forth. How do I decide what to change? So as I'm trying to revise and rewrite sections, how do I decide what to change? We are so closely embedded into our research that we probably look at our writing and we say, oh no, it's perfect. It's not. We do need somebody to give us, I guess, perspective or, a different viewpoint on it. But what we look at is we should go through and we should say, okay, how important in my message is this particular paragraph? Do I need this here? Is this essential? If I take this paragraph out, does it change the overall message or overall meaning of what I am trying to communicate to others? So deciding what to change is a hard thing. It's personal, but we have to go through and we have to be very objective. Now, to me, you can't do that when you're currently working on something. So what you need to do is you need to take a little break. You need to sort of stop with the dissertation, have a few days off, come back to it with a clear mind and go through it again and say, okay, is this good? Can I do something different here? Now, this is big picture. This is not so much about the words, but it's more the big picture. But you can also do with the words. You can go back and you can say, can I do this using different words? Can I explain this another way? If my sentence is more than 30 words long, how can I change it? And it's little things like that, that when it builds up, it actually makes a cleaner dissertation for you. How can I revise my original structure? Now, this one is very, very challenging from the overall editing perspective, because most of us are told, we have, uh, for example, a 5-chapter structure. That's normal. Okay, so we have to fit into that. We might have one of the checklists about what I need to put in there. The original structure comes down to, have I put across my research questions, my approach to solving those research questions? Have I put that across in a good way? Have I put across my analysis and my discussion in a good way? Or should I think about it? Should I think about presenting something else first? Do I give a context before I give specifics? Um, it is really a hard challenge in terms of revising a whole structure, but it still comes down to one thing. Did I need to say that? Did I need to write that in this piece of writing? How can I keep my literature current, and do I need to? So there's kind of some rules, unwritten rules, but pretty common, okay? The literature that you include at the end of your dissertation needs to be current. You should have, by the final dissertation, something around 70% of the literature cited being within the last 5 to 7 years. Now, I prefer 5 years because, things change a lot. But the rule is 5 years plus the amount of time you have been enrolled for your PhD. So it's really, the enrollment 5 years before your first enrollment period. And that's where you want the bulk of your literature, around 70-75% to be within that. We have to keep we have to keep our literature current, i.e. the latest, because when we start getting too much, when we don't update the literature as to what's happening right down to the week that you submit your dissertation, when we don't keep the literature up to date, in terms of your viva, the first thing I'm going to ask you, have you seen this article? Why was this not included? And this has happened. A couple of months before somebody submits their submits their dissertation, schedules for their viva, there's going to be publications that still happen. Something new happens, it's too hard to put in, they submit. As an examiner, the first thing I'm going to ask is, have you read this article? And I'm going to say, oh, and you say to me, yes. And I'm going to then say, well, why didn't you include it? It was published before you submitted your dissertation. So first of all, you look bad because you haven't kept up to date. Second, you look lazy because you could have done it. And third, what happens if I see something, I come across an article that was published after you submit it, but I'm still going to ask you a question about it, because I want to know that even once you've finished your dissertation, you have kept current with that reading, because this is your research. So no matter whether you've given it to me, I still expect to know that you've got it. I don't want to see a lot of old research. I was given a paper this afternoon to read, and it's okay. Nobody in this room, because someone in the room actually gave me something to read today as well, so it's not you. But I was given this paper from India, and it was okay. I was asked whether I thought it was publishable, and my honest answer was it needs more work, but I think there's a lot of promise with it because the topic is valid. It had 2 references that were from before 2000. So references, a reference from the 1980s and a reference from the 1990s, and that was the core reference. They were being used too much. And to me, that's like, so nothing's happened in the last 25 years. Why I look at keeping current is because things have changed. Anything we put that is old is there as a starting point only, but there should have been an evolution of thinking from it. So make sure the literature's current, make sure that as you keep reading, you add sections to it and you keep adding on what has changed or what has evolved, because that's actually very valuable to the structure. When you write, here's the challenge, because this is a problem with writing as well. We write a literature review, and then 10 more articles come out. We've got to place those 10 articles in our thinking of it. When we write a literature review, it's done two ways. It's thematic in the sense that, look, we're going to talk about the different themes related to our research. It's also chronological. We want to present earliest to latest. So we start with the oldest, we finish with the latest. So updating our literature review should be very easy. I've got a new article. Here's my new article here. I think it's got a valid point. I've got another article, this one, which is a little bit newer than that. So what I need to do is, in the theme that relates to these, I'm adding one or two sentences about this paper and how it has evolved the discussion or what contribution it has made. And then to finish it off, I'm going to put one or two sentences about this one, its contribution, and whether that cancels out anything else. Now, to me, this is just adding on. It should be natural. It should fit in. It shouldn't require us to restructure anything, because our job is to continually add on and showcase the contribution, which then influences us a little bit later. So when you're structuring, when you're writing, you should actually be doing it in piece by piece, where it's easy to take a new article and write more or write about it and add it on. And usually it will be a new paragraph within a section. So you can do that from the theme. You know, maybe this is just talking about a certain data collection protocol. No problem. Then we're showcasing how that's evolved. It becomes chronological or by time, the oldest one through to the newest one. Now, the last one I've got, and this is for everybody, and you know, the last one I've got on this page, I need to lose 10%. What do I do? This has happened a lot of times with people that I've met. And their supervisor, or if they're trying to publish in a journal, they're often told by the editor, you need to you need to lose 10% of the total word count. This is unfortunately a reality, and I think we all have to rely on the idea that this is going to be relevant for us. The way to lose 10% of our word count is actually getting rid of unnecessary words, shorter descriptions, looking at being active in the structure of our sentence, how we start the sentence, simpler sentences rather than too many. Let's go, up here. What is the difference between proofreading and editing? Now, to get rid of 10%, I need to eliminate one word. Proofreading / editing. I've got rid of and. Now, that's not a very thrilling example, but it is an example of being able to take a word out that isn't needed, that doesn't add to the sentence, and actually reducing. Now, we have to do that over and over and over again. This is where a good editor and proofreader combined comes into the picture. But what you can find doing is, if I'm told to reduce the amount of words significantly, this is not about taking out content. Don't go and say, oh, I'll throw away this paragraph and I'll throw away this section and I'll take this out. Because those points, excuse me, those points may still be very relevant for us. What we've got to do is just make our sentences easier. Because trust me, by the time you do a little bit of basic removal of words, fixing up a few grammar mistakes, and here, that 10% is so easy. So last year I had a proofreading client who did a great article for a journal that I know the editor of, and he asked me, you know, please help this researcher. And first she said to me, I need an edit. I know that it's got some challenges, and I understood what the challenges were. That was easy. Then she said to me, I need another favor from you, Craig. I need to get rid of 10%. I need to bring it down to a certain number. I'm like, okay, we can do that. And as I did the proofreading and a little bit of editing, I didn't need much, but as I did the proofreading and a bit of editing, by the time I tidied it up, I did a word count. I already lost 15% of total words. I was under. I went back to her, I said, done. We've come in under the word limit. Everything's been proofread. The structure's been adjusted a little bit. There you go. It was published straight after. So sometimes the whole thing is just remove a few words. Now we have to talk about style before we kind of go on to actually, the editing part of things. What is meant by academic style? We're told we need to write academically. It simply means active. You go straight to the point. Don't beat around the bush. Just make a sentence. This happened, this was next. We discovered this. This is the outcome. So be very, very direct. Style also relates to protocols. So how do I fit into the protocols that my university asks? Maybe there is a certain way they want us to do citations. Typically, we follow something like APA, American Psychological Association, MLA, Chicago style. Getting a guidebook on that and following it is what's important. Where do I find that? These are available everywhere online, but I'll probably share a couple of reasonably good ones that I have that summarize it. You need to ask your university what format do they want something in? And then it's not only about how do I cite something, but it's if I'm using quotations, verbatim words, i.e. the words that a respondent has used during an interview. Do I indent that? Do I put it in italics? All that. We have to take care to follow those guidelines. Should I use active or passive voice? Active. Go to the point, nothing else, okay? The passive voice means you're using more words than you need, kind of like me when I speak. But not only are you using more words, i.e. me being passive now, you're also showcasing in your writing that you are not very confident. Active writing is straight to the point. Active writing is telling the truth. Whereas passive writing is suggesting that the truth might be available through the written word and hoping that what I put there is accepted as the truth. And you can see the difference between the two sentences. Just a lot more words that really are not needed. So always active. what should go into appendices and footnotes, that one you have to discuss with your supervisor because it differs for every university. Some universities do not accept footnotes as an idea, as a style or a way to present something, okay? Appendices will put important information that might be relevant for the examiner first and the reader second to have access to, but you do not need it in your storytelling. So for example, I might put a copy of my survey, my questionnaire, into an appendix because I want to showcase what it was. I don't need that in chapter 3. I just need to refer to it. I might put a copy of the data set in an appendix. Several people I know have used an appendix to put a published article that they did that had some parallels to what was in their PhD dissertation as well. So that's what can put in there. So it's really just data, processes, and any explanations needed as this will help you if you need to understand, rather than put it in your main story. How complex or simple should sentences be? Simple. We want to make it easy. We want the reader to be able to take short bites under, a reasonable amount of words. How do I avoid sexist words? So I see this a lot. For example, and this can be a cultural element of writing. You may not even realize that you are doing this, but many cultures, when writing, the default is male. He does this, he should do that. You can use representative words, they. Um, Try not to use words that specify a gender, if possible. So the researcher, the participants, the only time you should be using he or she is maybe you've quoted or cited an author, and then you go on to say, he thought that. But what you actually should be doing is, rather than he thought that, you should be saying either the author's name, Selby 2024 suggested, or that researcher or the researcher suggested. So you really do want to try and avoid this. It's very challenging because it requires us to think a little bit differently. But my recommendation, when you're finished your dissertation and you're going through your dissertation again to get, to check on it, anytime you see he or she, anything that relates to male or female, unless it is specific data for your research, anything like that, then you've got to say, how can I make it blanket? By that, I mean, how can I make it just general, generic? And if I can do that, that's great. The last one, when do I use exclamation marks? Simple answer. In a dissertation, we never use exclamation marks because there is no place for them. Editing and finishing. What is meant by house style? So your university will probably have what is called a house style, a particular style of how you need to format your work that is kind of going to guide you. Now, for many of us, that will be the American Psychological Association, APA, it'll be MLA, it will be Chicago, or one of the other ones that's very well documented out there. But some universities have their own requirements. So first, always understand what their requirement is, because when you're proofreading, when you're going through and you're finalizing everything, it's not only the word choice. It's not only the grammar. It's not only the sentence structure. It's also making sure that you adhere to the style, the house style that your university has either told you to use, because it's APA, or your department has written its own guidelines, said you need to follow this way. Okay. Now, here's the point. If you do not adhere to the house style that your university requires, when it comes to your viva, you are going to be asked about that, and you are going to be told, well, you need to correct it. So there is a mismatch. I need you to go back and do it. Now, if that's the only thing that's holding you off actually passing that viva with either no corrections or very minor corrections, that's really silly. So try and do it from the early on. That also involves the difference between British and American English. And that one is a big challenge because many of us work in both. So make sure that your spelling either fits all British or all American. And if you're at a British university, do not use American English. That would be silly because they're going to look at you and feel strange. So understand what English is required. If your university is somewhere that choose one, it's fine. Choose one and use it consistently. Now that means you need to set up the spell checker on your computer to help you with that. There are differences between British and American English in both words and phrases. So sometimes the words that you might use may be popular in America, but a British speaker or a British educated person may not be that familiar with it. So a couple of simple examples. I'm sure many of us enjoy French fries. We go to McDonald's for French fries. French fries is an American word. Fries have nothing to do with France, by the way, but it's an American term. In England, in the UK, they're called chips. But chips in Australia are potato crisps, which are a whole different thing. So we've got to make sure that, look, if, we're consistent with ourselves. We're using British English in our dissertation, therefore I talk about chips. But when I'm citing another author, Selby 2023 highlighted the importance of the French fry culture. Oh, shit. So in square brackets afterwards, chips, so that you can showcase that you are subtly aligning what somebody else's words have used to ours. Now, that's our responsibility as a writer. We have to not correct others. We just have to make sure we're consistent with ourselves. I've got a really cool resource somewhere over there. I saw it the other day. It's like this little fold out thing about the difference between American and British English. And I think I'm going to grab that out. I will scan it and put it online and share it through the chat group. I personally don't care whether you use British English, American English, and any of the other versions of English out there. What I care about is, as a PhD candidate, we need to be consistent. So if you start with one all the way through, and if you are going to get a proofreading service, someone to help you, you need to be upfront and say, I want this in British English. Because they may go to a default of American, for example, or they may not care enough as long as it's spelt right and doesn't look wrong. So you need to tell them that. When do I stop writing? You have to draw a line. And the only reason you stop writing is because you've told your story, I don't need to say more. This question relates to, well, I just read a new paper today. How do I incorporate this? You've got to find a time that says, you know what, no more new papers. My write-up is done. I'm submitting next week or I'm submitting next month. I'm got my cutoff date Friday. That's it. Anything that gets published after Friday, don't include in your dissertation, but make sure you read it for your viva, just in case you're asked about it. How do I proofread my work? Talked about that. What last minute things should I look for? Again, it comes down to, does the story make sense? Have I got any paragraphs or sentences that seem too long? This is not about when you read it, whether it makes logic, okay? This is about, oh, look, I've got a paragraph that's 1 page long. Your intuition should say, how can I break that into 2? You should already be able to look and say, that's too long. Then you have to figure it out, what you do to break it in half, or where you split that paragraph up. So I look for the basic things rather than the specific things. I would also look for any extremely long words. I know it sounds silly, but sometimes when you see a relatively long word, it's an indication that maybe not always, but maybe you could have used a simpler word in its process. So let's get into the proofreading and editing advice. The problems to watch for. Watch out for personal nouns. I, he, she. Be distance. The researcher. The participant. Participants. So we're going for more formal academic, but we're also keeping it away from me. Farrell introduced me to a student who wants me to proofread and edit their dissertation. And everything's written in the first person. I did this, then I did this. I then interviewed these people. And to me, that's not academic. That's very casual. It's easy to change. But I need to keep the I out of it. I need to keep the first person out of it. Secondly, watch for directives. One must do this. When you are giving recommendations in your research, you're suggesting what is possible. You're not telling somebody like a primary school teacher tells a kid. You're not telling somebody it must be this way. You're making recommendations. So be cautious with your language in the recommendation section in particular. It's not about must be, must be, must be. It's about the possibility is this. Be very cautious with informal conversational tones using slang and idioms. Now, we all write differently. I accept that. But this is a serious document, and no matter where we are in the world and no matter what language we are using to engage with our dissertation, it still is a formal document. So the tone has got to be that. That's again why the first person, I did this, I suggest this, I did it that way, that doesn't work. The only place for informal conversation, slang or idiom is when you are citing a respondent. So say you've done an interview with me and you ask me a question, I'm like, yeah, mate, we do it this way, and I think it's like this, and blah, 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 blah. You can cite that word for word, no problem. But your writing about it, your analysis of it, respondent one casually thinks that has to be done in a formal tone. Watch out for wordiness. Don't use 2 words to describe something. Just use one. Keep it simple. The big green leafy tree. the tree. Keep it very simple, because we're not winning a journalism award. We're not writing a novel or a storybook for somebody. We're conveying what is important. So in respect to that, don't use too many words. And we can do this at writing phase. We can like, oh, I'm writing about something. Did I need that word to describe it? No, cut it out. Don't use vague expressions. Again, this is at writing phase. But when we're going through and we're editing, we can think about this. A vague expression is just sort of a term that kind of talks about something, but it doesn't add value. If your sentence or your phrase or your expression does not contribute understanding to the sentence, it's not needed. Where possible, not always okay, but where possible, avoid numbered lists and bulleted items. It doesn't mean take them out altogether, because once in a while you need it, but try not to use these too much. One, we use headings for important things, and that will evolve quite nicely. Two, if you're making lists or bullet points, you're giving me something that you're unlikely to be explaining. Therefore, my question, I will ask you, is it needed? Is it important? Is it relevant? And in that case, then I'm questioning your writing. So if you've got numbered lists, 1, 2, 3, 4, break them up into paragraphs. First, second, then. If you've got bullet points, try having them as a single list. We consider A, comma, 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 and do it that way, okay? Avoid descriptive writing. Again, we're not writing a novel. We're not writing a storybook for somebody to read. We're not writing a journalistic piece. When we become researchers, yes, sometimes we might write an article for a newspaper, and of course, our approach to that will change. But the dissertation itself is not a place for this. And also avoid or minimize the use of personal experience. So there's only 1 or 2 places personal experience comes into this. If I am writing a statement of positionality or a statement of reflexivity, personal experience will come in, and it's 1 or 2 paragraphs only. Personal experience should not come in. We're not going to write about the research method and then say, I thought the interviews were great, even though the content that I got or the responses I got from the participants weren't. That has no place. All you can say is respondents were reluctant to give detail despite probing. So again, it's just a formal versus an informal. Now, something important, as I said, it's not a grammar. It's never going to be a grammar lesson from me. But we do want to try and make it good. Rules concerning grammar and word structure do not apply when we're quoting someone. So either we are citing another author whose English or whose language is not correct, but we chose to use their words, we cannot change that. We cannot correct it. Likewise, if we have a respondent who, spoke differently or whatever, or doesn't use good grammar, we use their words verbatim. We use their words exactly as they say it. It's our job to convey the meaning of their words in our research. But we can put their words. Please do not correct it. Because the moment you correct it, you are not representing their voice. You are not representing their narrative. You've changed and edited their work, and that's not your job. Your job is your work is spot on. and your job is to interpret what they have done and what they've put. So how do I improve my own style? I use active voice. When I'm writing sentences, my use of punctuation can help. So, it's not like take one sentence and play with the punctuation, but think about, how am I going to use commas? How am I going to use semicolons? How am I going to use colons? How am I going to use dashes? Just adjust that a little bit so that every sentence has a sort of a unique feel about it. We don't want it, the tree was green. The cat sat in the tree. The cat was brown. The cat's fur was soft. All of those, they're simple sentences, but even the punctuation is the same. Can two sentences come together? The cat was brown, comma, with soft fur. That's okay. That's mixing up the punctuation. That's also number 3, varying your sentence structure a little bit. It's not about having the shortest sentences, because that's not at all what I mean. It is about having clear sentences that convey an important idea. So vary your sentence structure. Closely related to this, avoid choppiness. So the tree was green. The cat sat in the tree. That's choppy. It's too short. So just sort of look at that. And usually what I do there is I look at the most important of the simple sentences and I keep that short. And then the next sentences, I'm like, can I bring 2 sentences together? And that helps me to avoid the choppiness. It just doesn't sound like I'm doing rote learning from primary school. I want to avoid repetition. I don't want to be saying the same things. I don't want the same sentence in chapter 3 as I have in chapter 1. It's inevitable, it will happen, because that's how we write, that's how we think. But I want to try and avoid that repetition as much as possible. Be concise, so only tell me what you need. Use vocabulary that you know. Don't try to use words that you are not 100% sure of the meaning of. Because the moment you try to use words that you're not familiar with, mistakes will happen. And it changes how other people read your writing. But if you put the wrong word in there and I read it and I'm like, this person doesn't know this, it also influences my thinking about you as a researcher. So if you don't know a word like this, how can I believe everything else? So when I did my master's, I learned a few new academic words, but I had no idea their exact use. And I made mistakes. And, oh, not good. Being told, what does this mean? And you're like, and then that's not what it means. So unless you are certain, don't use it. If you are uncertain, use a dictionary, use a resource person, and either learn or take it out. But at the same time, don't use it, but work on expanding your vocabulary. Of course, our job as a researcher, as a PhD candidate, is to grow. So as we learn new words, that's a good thing. Now, it does not matter what language we are writing in. Even me at my stage, I still find new words that I've not come across before, and I have to use them. I learn what they mean, and I find ways to put them into a sentence. So I'm always expanding vocabulary. In the last few weeks, social media has made an old word very popular again, demure, D-E-M-U-R-E. Hate that word. It's like a long time word that never got used, and suddenly for some reason it's become popular again. But the funny part about it being popular is half the people using it don't know what it means, so they use it wrongly. If that was in a dissertation, I'm going to ask you during the Viva. The final one is keep your language formal. Avoid the language of everyday speech. This is a document. This is a formal document. We expect a certain style, so don't make it sound like a conversation you're having with a friend. Now, here's the challenge. Personally, when I write conversationally. I write like I'm having a discussion with somebody, and that is okay. But before I submit it to anybody, I've got to edit my style. I've got to take that conversational tone out. I've got to make it sound a little bit more direct, a little bit more academic, a little bit more serious as well. So make sure you work on that. Let's move into a key area, wordiness, okay? And this is, we just have too many words. So I'm going to give a couple of examples here. And I've got a few slides of examples, and then I'm going to have a look at a bit of writing, and we can practice this ourselves. The committee members decided to have an office party for the employees' children. The main reason for their decision to have a party for the children was that employees had been complaining that the company did not pay enough attention to family life. That's a really long and unnecessary sentence. A better way, not the best way, but a better way is committee members decided to have an office party for employers' children, comma. I've changed my sentence structure here, mainly because employees had been complaining that the company did not pay enough attention to family life. That took out a couple of phrases from the earlier sentence. It simply took out what wasn't needed to be communicated. The first one is kind of like when we have a conversation with somebody. We'll probably talk like that. The second one is just making it shorter. It's not removed anything, but what it did is it brought two sentences together as one sentence, and it got rid of words and phrases which were a repeat. So the main reason for their decision to have a party, well, we already know they're having a party. Why do I need to mention the party twice? It's redundant, it's unnecessary. So I can take that out. Instantly, the second paragraph, the one called better, is nicer to read. It's already more academic. Can I improve it? Yes. But if I don't improve it, will my supervisor look at it and say it's terrible? No. The supervisor will look and say it conveys a point, it's clean, it's clear, it's enough. So it is just about bringing concepts together, using less words to put into our sentences. We want to remove implied words. So, anything that kind of suggests, or anything that really isn't needed to contribute to the sentence. So the round yellow sun shone brightly among the clouds in the sky. So first of all, the sun is always round. Clouds are usually in the sky. Clouds are not in the ground under our feet. And better yet, what color is the sun? It's typically yellow, orange. We can debate that, but I don't need to tell you the color of the sun to say the sun is out, because you're not going to say, oh, is that the bright pink thing in the sky? The sun shone brightly among the clouds. Now, I could even get rid of among the clouds. I could make it even better. The sun shone brightly. Very simple. That's all I needed to get there. But I gave it a little context just to cheer it up, okay? She wore a coat in a red color. Now, this is one of the things I hate the most, especially in the region where I live. Everybody uses the word green color, yellow color, red color. If it's red, it's red. If it's orange, it's orange. You don't need to tell me that. She wore a red coat. Now, the wordy version, she wore a coat in a red color, is what's called passive. Actually, we are talking about the color of her coat, red. So bring that straight forward. She wore a red coat. Done. Simple, active, direct to the point. No need. We don't say she wore a red colored coat. Red is the color. She wore a red coat. So even little things like this. Now imagine if all of our sentences had an opportunity to take out one word like this, it will actually help us reduce our overall word count, but it will also help us make the story, make the communication, the telling of the narrative. It will help us make that much easier. Now, here are some what we call wordy phrases or stock phrases. And this is, again, passive versus active. When you find yourself writing sentences like at the present time, be the opinion that, during the time that, in spite of the fact that, all of these are just long phrases that we don't need, and they can be shortened and replaced by singular words. Now, again, as we are going through and we are editing our own writing, we should be looking for phrases like this. Have I used, in view of the fact that, it's actually common. We might use it. We'll see it in a lot of places. But we can say, because. So we can take these phrases out. So we should be looking for these phrases that we can replace with much simpler words or terms as we progress through it. Okay, so for the purpose of, so, it makes it much easier to get to the point we're making. It makes it much easier for the reader. The best part is when I use the wordy phrase, the impression that other people get is I'm not so confident. I'm trying to maybe justify or defend or usually just delay. I'm trying to, I'm sort of like not 100% confident of the statement I'm making. When I use a singular word singular word to introduce an idea, it showcases I'm more confident. As a PhD candidate, as a researcher, our ability to show our confidence with how we communicate our research actually is a fantastic thing for us because we are the expert. And surprisingly, using less words to communicate an idea is more aligned with the expert than the beginner. Okay, some other sentence structure, simplifying our sentence structure. The cliffs are made of basalt, which is an igneous rock. Better, the cliffs are made of basalt and igneous rock. Now, I've only taken a couple of words out, nothing much. It still makes it just that little bit clearer. Okay, I don't need which is. Now, that's not much to take out, but it's actually enough that kind of brings things very together. The MRSA virus, which is resistant to antibiotics, poses a serious public health risk. I wrote this well before COVID, so this is, I should not talk about viruses. But the MRSA virus, which is resistant to antibiotics, poses a serious health risk, becomes antibiotic resistant MRSA virus poses a serious public health risk. I've changed the order. I've taken out some words. I've got to the key point. And the key point is antibiotic resistance, health risk. Two things there in the sentence, no questions that need to be asked as a result of that. Now we can look at how do I reword some things. So, it's very often we write a sentence and we use a delay. There are a few things to consider. It is like this. We need to just go to the point. So the examples I've used, look, there are many factors contributing to the obesity epidemic. Again, there I am with health. This is going to change. Many factors contribute to obesity or to the obesity epidemic. Again, I'm only taking one or two words out, but I'm going direct to the point. There are many factors. I don't need there are. It doesn't help my sentence. It just takes up space. It is unknown whether the vaccine will be effective. Sounds about right for COVID. The vaccine's effectiveness is unknown. Actually, the key concept here is effectiveness of that vaccine. Again, I've only got rid of 2 or 3 words, but I sound more confident in my writing because I'm stating it as a fact rather than trying to tell a little bit more of a story. So where possible, bring it down, bring your sentences back as simple as possible. So anytime, again, as you're reviewing your document, anytime you find yourself writing a sentence with there is, there are, it is, think about, can I just remove that? And as you go through, because we all have a unique style. So if you use there are once, you'll probably use it 50, 100 times. It's part of our thinking and it's part of our pattern of writing. So we can start taking it away. And in the future, because we start editing it out as we continue our writing and we start finding ourselves typing, there are several, we're like, oh yeah, delete. Several factors, boom. And it changes, slowly changes the way in which we may write the words that we're trying to get across. The next one is limiting or avoiding attitude. Now, attitude is when we put through our choice of words, we put into our writing our own opinion, our own bias. We should all be familiar with the concept of bias. And bias is when we put our own worldview on top of others. Now, we cannot avoid having a worldview. Okay, that's certainly not something that will happen. But we can put it, in a much easier way that looks less biased from that perspective. So I've just got a few examples. It seems to me that teachers should allow students to skip class. Now that's an opinion. That's not my opinion, by the way, but it's an opinion. An easier way is teachers, actually I would change this. Teachers could allow students to skip class. The difference between should and could, should, actually, as I've written it, still has a bit of a bias. If I say could, it's an option. So I would actually change that even further. Teachers could allow students to skip class. It's a fact. It's not saying I believe it should be the case, or it's softening. Even if I say teachers should allow students to skip class, it's softening my opinion. Because the moment I say it seems to me that, this is about me, this is not about teachers, this is not about class or students, this is about me. This one, you'll probably write something like this in your own dissertation. The purpose of this paper is to, I know the purpose of the paper. You're going to write it. Don't tell me. Um, so the purpose of this paper is to inform you of my opinion that all family pets should be, excuse me, all family pets should be spayed or neutered. Actually, you don't, it's my opinion. I'm writing it. You know it's my opinion. You don't need to be told. You don't need the purpose of this paper. Just simply say a statement. All family pets should be spayed or neutered. And in fact, some of you may say, oh, can I get rid of spayed or neutered? One of those two words. They're kind of gender because I think we neuter males and we spay females. I'm not 100% sure, but you could actually replace it with a singular word to convey the same idea, and nobody's going to question you from that. This one. The previous paragraphs of this paper have explained how Dickinson uses word choice and images to communicate her theme. Most of us will write like this in our literature review, especially as we're trying to frame up for another researcher and then put in their ideas. Simply say Dickinson uses word choice and images to communicate her theme. So again, it's just becoming more active. But interestingly enough, it takes away a little bit of attitude. It takes away a little bit of bias. So strategies for understanding academic writing and its jargon. And jargon is the one that's going to be a bit of hard work for us, okay? Because we have to use jargon. We have to use technical terms. They are usually subject or discipline based. They're important. We have to put them in there. And it is specific to our primary audience, our primary readership. But make sure that, look, we have to use it, yes, but don't overcomplicate it. You're going to have people reading your dissertation or reading your research who might be new to this as well. So don't make it too complicated. Can we use a little bit more simple, informal terminology to work just as well? Okay. The other thing to do, and this is a technique that I very much appreciate, we have to use jargon. We have to use technical vocab. No problem. Give me a glossary. One of those appendixes or appendices. What are all the jargon or technical words that you use? What's a definition? And where can I go find out more about it? If you have a glossary for me, it helps me as a reference point. But the best part is I'm not going to the dictionary. I'm going within your dissertation. So sometimes we have to. So last week, I was reading a MBA thesis for someone. And she is a medical biological sciences practitioner doing a marketing business development based MBA. Her MBA was full of medical terms. The thesis, sorry, the writing was full of medical terms. And I'm reading, I'm lost. And some came out, but others, you just need to put it somewhere so that I have a quick reference to where it is. All of these things, before I get into the next one, all of these things is about making your writing easier. It's not about learning grammar. It's not about, being more proficient in a language. It's simply about finding simple things that we each are capable of doing just to make our writing a little bit better. Yeah, it's going to take us time. When we've got a 500-page document and we have to go through it and all of that, it's going to take time. But it's going to improve, your chances of success. That we want you to graduate. Your supervisor wants you to graduate. But also it's going to improve your professional development, because what I discover is the more I practice self-editing of my own work, the more natural it becomes in subsequent writing that I write in a cleaner way. If you read things that I wrote close to 30 years ago when I started my career, they are crap. Oh my God, they are terrible. They got accepted and I got published. But when I look at it today, I cringe with embarrassment. But that simply means over time, I became better at writing. And that's the goal. As a supervisor, I'm not looking for a Nobel Prize winning literary work. I'm looking for clean communication, conveying your research, your ideas, your understanding, and reading your work isn't going to be stressful to me. I want to read it, nod my head a few times, like, oh, that's interesting, great. That's how I want to read, and that's how you can give to me. Now, I sort of got a bit of a weird activity here, and I'm going to do this. I'm not sure how I do this. This is actually something I wrote many years ago. I never published it because it was a book I was working on, and in the end, I decided, I just don't have the energy for it. But what I thought we could do is have a little think about it. And what I'm going to do is, I know that everybody who's here tonight is in our WhatsApp chat group. I'm going to put this slide and the next slide into the WhatsApp chat group. And at some stage, if you want to have a go at editing it, just send your version to me via WhatsApp. But let me do a little bit, okay? Painting the picture of the university experience. Very exciting. I have a heading that I've tried to make too flowery. I've tried to make it too storybookish. Actually, my heading can be the university experience. Painting the picture gives me nothing. Let's go down to the second paragraph because I want you guys to try the first paragraph yourself, okay? A university has professors, lecturers, libraries, laboratories, research, and most important, rigor. Rigor is important at universities. We know everything else. You don't need to tell me that a university has professors and libraries and stuff. It's not needed. So you just say, important at a university is rigor. So I'm actually getting rid of a lot of things. I want to go to the last sentence just for a moment before I kind of wrap up for Q&A. If this nexus is disturbed through quality management issues or other such factors, it becomes difficult for the student to proceed along that important career path either chosen for them or self-selected. Yeah, what does nexus mean? I actually used a word that personally I have never used in a sentence in my lifetime other than this particular piece of writing. It's kind of, it sounds too, what's the word? I've forgotten the word to describe how it sounds, but it's just too up there. It's too over the top as a word. The sentence structure itself is an absolute nightmare. Now, this is an example of how I write. I write like a conversation. I put in all my stuff. Later, I edit. So my challenge for you guys, I'm going to put this and I'm going to put this one up in our chat group. If you want to have a go at editing it, do it, send it to me. I'll let you know how well you've done. I'm not going to do it online now, but it's something that you can send to me later. So there's a second one, the university experience from a student's eyes. And I probably, Farrell will tell you, you've got the apostrophe in the wrong place. Very likely I have. Again, similar thing. How can I reduce this? What's the key message I want to get across? How do I make it easier? I'm not taking away the message. I'm just taking away the unnecessary words that get us into that point.